63 Cup Series wins, 2 championships, one of the most dominant drivers NASCAR has ever seen. And right now, Kyle Busch hasn't been to victory lane in over 100 races. Let that number sink in for a moment. Not 10 races, not 20, over 100 starts without a single win. And through the first 10 races of the 2026 season, Busch sits 27th in the Cup Series stand, a number so far from where anyone expected him to be that it reads like a misprint. Now, Dale Earnhardt Jr., NASCAR Hall of Famer, team owner, and one of the most respected voices in the sport, has stepped forward and delivered the kind of honest, unflinching assessment that nobody inside Richard Childress Racing wants. What he said on his podcast cuts straight to the heart of this situation, and it raises a question that every NASCAR fan is now asking. Is this crew chief change the spark that saves Kyle Busch's season, or is the hole he's in too deep to climb out of? Let's walk through exactly how he got here and what it all means. To understand the weight of this story, you have to understand who Kyle Busch is. This isn't a mid-pack journeyman having a bad year. This is a man with 63 career Cup Series victories and 392 top 10 finishes and 757 starts. He is a 2-time Cup Series champion, and during his years at Joe Gibbs Racing, he routinely terrorized the rest of the field every single week. He ran all 3 NASCAR series simultaneously at his peak, racking up wins across the Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series at a pace no one else in the modern era could. When Busch left JGR and signed with Richard Childress Racing ahead of the 2023 season, it was one of the biggest storylines in recent NASCAR history. In his first year with the organization, it showed genuine promise. He won 3 races in 2023 and finished 14th in the final standing. The move looked like it could work, but it didn't hold. 2024 brought no win. 2025 brought no wins. His last Cup Series victory came at Gateway in June 2023, and the winless streak has been building ever since. He missed the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. The last time he finished in the top 10 of the final standings was 2021, when he placed 9th. The decline has been steady, visible, and now in 2026, it has reached a point where even the people inside the organization can no longer wait. Busch is also in a contract year. Every race, every finish, every decision made by RCR right now carries the weight of his future, and there is no safety net below this season. The numbers for 2026 tell the story better than anything else. Through 10 races, Busch holds an average finish of 22.1, more than 4 positions worse than his 2025 average. He sat 27th in the Cup Series standings. That is 66 points below the playoff cut line with 16 races remaining. Before the race at Talladega Superspeedway, Busch had posted 5 consecutive finishes outside the top 20, 5 in a row. Going the first 9 races without cracking the top 10 was the longest stretch Busch had ever gone into a season without banking a top 10 result. By every major statistical category, 2026 was on pace to be the worst year of his entire career. The only 2 moments worth noting from the early part of the season were the pole position at the Daytona 500, a reminder that the raw speed is still in there, and then a 10th place finish at Talladega Superspeedway, which gave RCR their first and only top 10 finish as an organization through 10 races. But it was Bristol Motor Speedway that made the situation impossible to ignore any further. Busch finished 25th at Bristol, 2 laps down, in a race that went sideways in every direction. On the track, he got tangled up with Riley Herbst of 2311 Racing on multiple occasions, a side story that added frustration on top of frustration. Off the track, or rather on the radio, things got worse. During the race, crew chief Jim Pohlman was heard on the secondary radio channel, growing increasingly frustrated with the cars handling it. Busch had been asking for help with rear grip throughout the race. Pohlman called for adjustments to tighten the car, and when the problems persisted, he went to spotter Derek Nealand with a blunt question. What is the freaking problem now? Is the thing sideways, or is it plowing? What the expletive does it look like? When Nealand responded that the car still wasn't getting into the corner, Pohlman pressed further. Why? I don't get it. We tightened it up, and why can't it get in the expletive corner? Nealand, in what may have been the most composed moment of the entire race, responded, I don't know. I got a headset on, not a helmet. I don't know. Later, during a caution period after the first Busch-Herbst incident, Nealand tried to refocus the team. He told Pohlman directly, listen, I know you're frustrated. I don't like running 30th either, but us yelling at each other during the race isn't going to help. Like we've got to keep the glue molded together here. We're all still in it together, and it's not over. Pohlman's response to that plea for unity was 3 words. Just same expletive every week. That line leaked out and spread across NASCAR media almost immediately. Fox Sports analyst and former Cup champion Kevin Harvick was asked about it directly on his podcast, Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour, and he didn't soften his assessment at all. He could be mad at me, Harvick said, but talking like the way they talked on Channel 2 after Bristol that week, that was unacceptable. That is the wrong guy. Hours after Busch scored that 10th place finish at Talladega, RCR's only top 10 result of the entire season, the organization made a move. Jim Pohlman was relieved of his crew chief duties on the number 8 Chevrolet. Andy Street was named as his replacement, effective immediately and for the remainder of the 2026 season. It is worth understanding who both of these men are, because this is not a story about one bad person replacing a good one. Jim Pohlman is a respected figure in NASCAR. He came to RCR from JR Motorsports, where he served as the crew chief for Justin Allgaier in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. He won the 2024 O'Reilly Championship with Allgaier. That was not a fluke, and no credible voice in the sport has suggested otherwise. But RCR President Mike Verlander confirmed what had become clear from the outside. At the same time, we expect better results, and that requires us to continually evaluate and make adjustments. Jim has more than 2 decades of success in this sport and will remain an important part of our team. Pohlman is moving into a leadership role within RCR's competition department. The organization is keeping him. They're simply moving him off the pit box. Andy Street is the man stepping in, and this is where the move begins to make real sense. Street has been part of the Childress organization for over 2 decades. He won 11 races as a crew chief in the O'Reilly Series, 10 of those with Austin Hill, and he led Hill to the championship 4 in 2024. Critically, Street is not a stranger to Kyle Busch. After former RCR crew chief Randall Burnett announced he was leaving for Trackhouse Racing in 2026, Street stepped onto the pit box for the final 5 races of the 2025 season. In those 5 races, Busch finished 34th due to a crash, then 8th, 19th, 13th, and 5th in the season finale of Phoenix Raceway. The two have a working relationship. They know each other's communication styles. As Fox Sports Motorsports insider Bob Pockras described it, this is not a change from a known to an unknown. It is a change from one known quantity to another, and the expectation is that it brings stability. Richard Childress framed the decision this way. This move is about putting our people in the best position to succeed. We have strong talent across this organization, and we're focused on having each person in the right position to help deliver the results we expect. After the crew chief change was announced, Kyle Busch walked into the RCR shop and addressed the entire floor in a town hall meeting. Austin Dillon, his teammate, confirmed that Busch led the room that day and set the tone. By all accounts, it was a measured, forward-looking meeting. When Busch spoke to reporters later at Texas Motor Speedway, after finishing runner-up in the Craftsman Truck Series race on Friday, he was direct about why the change happened. "I think the writing is in the point standings," he said. "We're not where we need to be. There's got to be a change somewhere." He addressed what he said to the shop floor. "I thank Jim for his leadership and for him being there and being a part of the team and what he did for the time. I'm full in. I'm all committed. I've never probably worked as much in these last 4 years as I did in 15 at JGR. That's due to us needing to get better and us getting the things heading in the right direction." That last line is important. Busch is not pointing fingers at the people around him. He is acknowledging that RCR, including Richard Childress himself, Mike Verlander, teammate Austin Dillon, has provided resources, and the results simply have not matched the effort. It's just not quite come together with the results of winning, he said plainly. On working with Street, Busch gave a clear picture of why the pairing makes sense to him personally. "Andy and I, we conversate a lot and did a lot last. I feel like he has a simpler mentality about how he goes about looking at it. It has to make sense to him for him to be able to believe it, and he doesn't just believe in what the computer tells him. I feel like that's a good way of being back to basics and a little bit more methodical about race car." He did not promise a sudden turnaround. "Do we come to Texas and flip everything around and run top 10 right here, right now? Not sure about that," he admitted. "We certainly have done all of our due diligence this week in trying to be as prepared as we best know how." That is the voice of a champion who still believes, but who also understands the reality of the situation he is in. This is where the conversation took its most significant turn. Dale Earnhardt Jr. went on his podcast Dirty Air, produced through Dirty MO Media, and gave his full, unfiltered take on the Kyle Busch situation at RCR. What made his words carry real weight is not just his. Dale Jr. is a NASCAR Hall of Famer, a former team owner at JR Motorsports, and a man who has personally navigated the pressure of a struggling race team. When he speaks about this, he is speaking from experience, not from the stands. His first point was a call for perspective. The radio drama, the leaked frustrations, the public tension. Dale Jr. acknowledged all of it, but he pushed back on the notion that it is somehow extraordinary. He noted that there has been a lot of radio chatter that has become public, but that this is not uncommon. It is just highlighted because it is Kyle Busch, and he is struggling, unlike Kyle Busch. That distinction matters enormously. Tense radio exchanges happen on almost every team every single weekend in the Cup Series. The difference here is that when it is Kyle Busch, a man who used to be untouchable, every frustrated word becomes a national headline. His second point was the one that should give RCR fans the most pause. Dale Jr. was careful and deliberate in warning people not to expect the crew chief change to immediately solve. He spoke from direct experience, saying, "I've been in this situation when you make a change mid-season. It is really hard to find positivity and try to figure out how to be hopeful that things are going to improve. A new crew chief means a new voice on the radio, new approaches to set up, and new team chemistry to build, and all of that takes time. Time is precisely what Kyle Busch and Richard Childress Racing do not have." His third point was a defense of Jim Pohlman. Dale Jr. was clear that Pohlman should not be treated as a villain in this story. He described Pohlman as an awesome guy, very, very passionate, while also acknowledging that just a handful of races into the season, the pairing simply was not producing. Talent and effort on both sides of the pit box cannot always overcome a chemistry mismatch. That is the hard reality of this sport. His fourth point was perhaps the most grounding thing said about this entire situation. Dale Jr. reminded everyone, fans, media, social media commentators, that none of us actually know what happens inside the walls of that RCR shop. He said, "We ain't in the building. We don't know what the conversations are like. They know way more than any of us." That is a statement worth sitting with. The calls being made inside RCR are being made by people who have access to engineering data, internal meetings, team dynamics, and conversations that never reach the public. The loudest opinions on social media are being formed with the least information. But Dale Jr. did not end on a purely cautionary note. He closed with something that reflected the core culture of racing itself. They're racers, right? They think they're going to figure it out. That belief, that grinding commitment to finding a way forward regardless of the circumstance, is what keeps teams like RCR functioning even in the middle of a difficult season. Bob Pockrass of Fox Sports framed this crew chief change in terms that deserve serious attention. In his assessment, this move feels like one last gasp, an attempt to see if the Busch-RCR relationship can be salvaged before both sides have to make decisions about 2027, and Busch isn't a contract year. The next few months will determine whether he recommits to the organization or begins conversations with other teams. As Pockrass noted, no one would expect him to want to stay if he is running 27th. Kevin Harvick's diagnosis adds another layer of complexity to the entire situation. On Kevin Harvick's happy hour, he was asked directly why RCR drivers are struggling, and his answer pointed to systemic issues that go well beyond any single personnel decision. When you see some struggles like they're having, this is all about details. If you're struggling, it's all about your processes and your details and your simulation and your tools, and who's putting all that stuff into the simulator and what you're getting out of the simulation and how you put those and adapt those things to the setup of the car. That is a description of organizational infrastructure, not a problem that gets fixed by changing the name of the person on the pit box. RCR as an organization has been in decline for several seasons. The Chevrolet manufacturer has had broader struggles across the board in the Cup Series, which compounds the challenge for every team running their cars. Busch himself acknowledged that RCR has provided resources, and the problem is that talent and resources, without the right technical details stacking up correctly at every level, do not automatically produce results on. This is the environment Andy Street is walking in. A two-time champion who hasn't won in over 100 races. A team sitting 27th in points with 16 races left. An organization carrying the weight of several disappointing seasons. A driver facing the biggest career decision of his life in the coming months. in a NASCAR world watching every single development with a microscope. The question now is simple, and it has no certain answer. Is Kyle Busch close to breaking the streak with this new setup, or is this slump going to keep dragging on through the rest of 2026? Does the prior working relationship between Busch and Andy Street provide enough of a foundation to turn results around quickly enough to matter? Or does Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s warning about the difficulty of mid-season crew chief changes prove accurate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Is Dale Jr. right that this change is harder than it looks from the outside? Or do you believe the people inside RCR are going to figure it out? Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss the updates as this story continues to develop through the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series.